Okay, I'm going to have a little discussion here about brushes, sculpting brushes in particular. These are the things you're going to use all the time. I mean, just simply all the time when you're working in ZBrush. We'll get into some more esoteric brushes in the videos after this, but this is going to be your main go-to thing you're going to be working with. Okay, so the first one is just the standard brush. So if you remember with key commands, it's B, S, and T. That gets us to the standard brush. This is the one that ZBrush starts up with. Okay, so it's really simple. It really is just basically used to draw lines. Okay, and the amount of intensity or how high those go is just based on this Z intensity slider up here. Okay, like so. And that's, pretty much the basics of what that brush does. Okay, you can use it with the dots, or it's actually designed to be used with this dot setting. And just as a general rule of thumb, you don't usually want to have the intensity set super high. Anytime you're working, it just gives you a little less, finesse. You can't really do what you might want to do with it if it's jumping and making these giant mountains of things instantly. Okay, so again, this is kind of your basic, go-to brush just to start out, without much more, discussion than that. The other one that kind of is a really good complement to that is the DAM standard brush, which is this one right here. Okay, and DAM doesn't mean DAM; it stands for Damien, who is a ZBrush user who actually designed this brush. And you can design your own brushes. There's lots of info online how you can do that, and it's all basically done inside the brush palette here. So the DAM standard has this really nice little alpha here, which means when you draw with it, you get this nice indentation that kind of puckers out or pulls out, kind of like an incision almost. Really, really nice. And it's very, very clean and smooth. I'll just divide this up again, just so you can kind of see how clean this thing is. It's really, it's a dandy. It's really very, very useful brush. Okay, so if I just work my way around like that, kind of see what that looks like. Okay, so it's really super smooth, really clean. It's a great brush for doing wrinkles or little puckers under eyes, things like that. You can just get right in there and work with it. And you can probably tell I'm using a tablet now, not a mouse, to draw with, because it's pretty much impossible to do those kind of moves with a mouse, which is why I suggest you all get a tablet. I'm just going to undo back here to where we were before that stroke. Okay, so that's the Damien standard. And remember, again, that if you hold the Option key down, things will go in the opposite direction. Okay, so if I do this and then back again, that's what I get. So you see, and you can do it right in the middle of a stroke. Okay, so you see how that kind of pops in and pops out, like so. I should divide this again, and just to show you, because I undid my dividing. So let me just show you how that looks when you kind of do it that way. Okay, so again, super useful brush. That's the other real go-to. You'll use a bunch, the Damien standard. Okay, what else? The clay brushes are really useful. So BC, just to kind of thin these down a bit. So the first one is just clay. Okay, I don't use this one a lot. It's kind of, I don't know, a little mushy, kind of lumpy. It's okay, and again, brushes you can build them up with repeated strokes in the same spot, which is why this intensity thing is not something you want to bump way up, because you can actually build them up as you repeatedly move in the same direction. Okay, so that's just regular old clay, and that's not a bad brush, but I tend to like the two other clay brushes, the clay buildup, which is this one right here. Find it, there we go. Oh, I'm still on clay, sorry about that, didn't actually grab it. There it is. Now there I just went up to my frequently used or recently used brushes to grab it rather than digging in. Okay, so this one's really attuned and very sensitive to how hard you push. So the pressure is mapped to the height a bit. Okay, so if I start out very light and push harder, to get more of that going. And this is a brush where you're really going to want to then, as soon as you make these strokes or when you've got something you like, go ahead and use the shift key to smooth them out. Okay, so that kind of gets rid of this hard edge in the alpha that's showing. It's kind of a square looking shape there, like so. Okay, oops, how do you get under there? All right. So this might be like a really useful thing for like defining muscles, where certain muscles are pulling, one thing against another. Get the ribs in here, things like that, where you have something you want to exaggerate a little bit or define, and then smooth it down, and you start to get this really nice looking form on top of the surface. Okay, so again, that one. Then the other one is the clay tubes. Okay, so there's another clay brush that's quite useful. Again, now these actually are building out kind of the geometry on this. They're pulling it out from the surface as opposed to just moving it around. Where's my clay tubes? There we go. Okay, a lot like clay buildup, not quite as dramatic in terms of the way the shape builds up. Okay, so it's a little less exaggerated, this guy. Okay, my guy. Turn perspective off here for a second so I can show you a little bit more here. Okay, so again, do that and then just hit the shift key to smooth, and that's just a really great way to function and work as you start trying to define some of these shapes, draw lines, things like that. Good way to go. And if you keep smoothing, eventually it'll just really soften down to the point of almost being non-existent. Okay, so that's a good one as well. Okay. Then the other one you're going to use a lot, and this isn't actually a sculpting brush, but you're going to be using it all the time, is the move brush. Okay, and I'll just make this a little larger. It doesn't add or delete any geometry from your model, okay, and it doesn't really affect the surface. What it does is smoothly move things around. Okay, so if you wanted to, flatten the dog's nose here, or change, the type of dog here entirely, you can kind of see how nice and smooth this thing actually works. Look, getting more of a greyhound looking snout here. Well, that's really bad, but you get the idea. Then there are other types of move brushes as well. And the other one that you'll use from time to time is the move topological. And what that does is it tries to recognize where one object floats or flows into another, and it tries to stop it from moving at that point. So you'll see here with the move topological, it doesn't tend to pull the other geometry as much with it. I have kind of a big brush here. So where would you do that? Well, something like ears. Like if you have ears on a human that you want to, manipulate, but you don't want to pull the skin around the ears with it. This is a great brush to use for that. Same thing with lips, or where you have, for instance, on the dog here, where we have this lip and this lip next to each other. This guy will let you pull one without really affecting the other as much. Okay, and you can kind of see how that works. Give him the old snarly look, Okay. So again, that is a really useful thing. Otherwise, you would have to mask out the area you didn't want to affect and kind of noodle it that way, which is something you can also do if this isn't quite working for you. But this is a really great way to get that result very, very quickly without having to fuss around too much. Okay. A couple others, the inflate tool, an inflate brush, sorry. I'm so used to calling things tools from other programs. Okay, if I just hold this down, you'll see how it just starts to bulge out the geometry here, like so. Okay, that's a good one as well. And then there are some that will actually flatten the geometry rather than, you know, inflate it. And something like the planer brush here, you can see how that just kind of flattens areas like this. Okay, I'm pushing way too hard on that, but you get the idea. I'll bring this out. Okay, so you can take something and, oops, that's really heavy duty. Yeah, I got this intensity is pretty big. Okay, but you can kind of see how that, it's almost like taking a piece of clay and scraping at it with a scraper or a flat shape of some sort to give you this planar area to work with. Okay, that just probably collapsed that completely. Yeah. Okay, but you get the idea here, and so that's really useful. It's particularly useful for more mechanical stuffs too. So you can start out with something fairly, you know, round in ZBrush, and then start to flatten it out by using this kind of a tool on it, okay, to give it a more, you know, hard-edged appearance. And there are a number of these. There's planar, there's polish, which is a softer version of that. It doesn't work quite as instantly like that one does. So polish, for instance, will take an area and you can just slowly flatten it out. Okay. So I'm pushing pretty hard on this, and you'll see how slowly that goes down. Okay. There's some other ones like the trim adaptive. That's another one that will just sort of flatten things out. Okay. Again, you can experiment with these as you start, when we get into actually playing around with things a bit and making a mess of stuff in ZBrush, and then you can play with these and get a sense of how they work. But they all have their uses. And as you saw in the brush video, there are lots more of these things out there that you can mess around with. You can see how you can take something organic and quickly turn it into something that looks robotic or metallic or you know, unworldly, and very quickly in here by playing around with these things. Okay, I think that's about it for the really basic brushes you're going to be using. Then we'll get into some of the more bizarre stuff, which have specific purposes that aren't always obvious, but you need to know that they're there for when you have run into a problem that you can't figure out how to get out of. All right, cool. All right, I'll be back.